Hey everyone, welcome back to Crime Family. I'm your co-host AJ, and I'm here with Katie, my sister, and my co-host as well. It's just going to be the two of us for today's episode. Stephanie was unable to join us, but we do have quite an interesting case to talk about with you. This is quite an older case, so it happened in the late 90s, and it's an unsolved case from the 90s. But I just came across it kind of randomly when I was going down the true crime rabbit hole and saw this case, and it was really crazy to me and like super interesting. So I sort of went down the rabbit hole and wanted to do it on the show. I think Katie, you were already familiar with this case, right? Before we decided to talk about it.
Yeah, so I had heard about it like years ago, and yeah, when you brought it up, I knew exactly what you were talking about because I think about this case all the time, actually. Like every time somebody talks about a cruise ship, like, I don't know, we were talking about we want to go on a cruise sometime, like this always comes to my mind. um, just because it's like super terrifying, like when we get into it, like what if it's true, what is happening, what happened to her, and it's still a mystery because you don't actually know. It's like she just kind of vanished. So, yeah, it's really interesting and super scary.
Yeah. And I've never been on a cruise ship before. This makes me hesitant, probably. And also, it's kind of crazy because there's actually a lot of cases, not exactly similar to this, but cases of disappearances on cruise ships. So maybe we'll do those on other episodes because it's pretty interesting when you look into it of like the amount of people that have gone missing
Yeah, yeah.
from cruises.
Yeah, when you listen to like other episodes about this case, they always mention, oh, there's like hundreds of people that go missing off of cruise ships. Like, so it's crazy. They just like disappear. So sketchy. I'm
Yeah,
gonna think about it. Like, a cruise ship out in the middle of the ocean would be like a perfect place for you to like throw somebody overboard. And like chances that there's probably cameras everywhere now, but when you think back, especially back in the 90s, you could chuck someone overboard and out in the middle of the ocean and no one would find them. No one would know it was you when it actually happened if it was like the middle of the night, right? So it's scary.
And also just when you think of it too from like an investigative standpoint, like if it happens in international waters, it's like a logistical nightmare of like who is responsible for doing this investigation, like which country, if it's like international waters, right? Like just from
Yeah,
that
like who has
perspective, like, it would be a
jurisdiction on
nightmare.
that? Yeah, like nobody owns those oceans out there, right? So it's like nobody's really going to take charge, really. So it's scary.
Yeah. So you could imagine everyone would be just all like super distracted by trying to figure out paperwork and logistically like who's supposed to be taking on this investigation, that it would like probably slow a lot of things down. So and it's just crazy. So this case is really, really interesting and really creepy. So it's the case of Amy Lynn Bradley. And like I said, it's from the late 90s. And so just a little bit about Amy and like her early life. So she was born on May  12th, 1974 in Petersburg, Virginia. And as she grew up and through high school, she was very athletic and she was a very driven individual. She was particularly close to her younger brother, Brad, and she excelled in basketball and earned a scholarship to Longwood University. She was also a very skilled swimmer, and she worked as a swim instructor at some point throughout college, up into her graduation. Um, so, yeah, just very likable, very friendly, outgoing, and just very athletic. And before her disappearance, Amy actually planned to return to school for a master's degree in sports psychology. So this case really begins in March of 1998. And it was in March when Amy's father, Ron, was actually gifted a 7-day cruise from his employer. And it was for his entire family. And so, that was an exciting prospect. They wanted to take this family trip together, the four of them. So, him and his wife, and then their two kids, Brad and Amy. And so they told Amy that they wanted her to come with them on this cruise. And she was actually originally hesitant about going. And interesting fact, Amy, although she was a strong swimmer, she actually had a fear of the open ocean and she didn't really like the idea of a cruise. So it kind of took a little bit of, you know, time for thinking for her and kind of convincing from her family before she decided to go, but ultimately she did decide to join her family. And the cruise ship they were on was the Rhapsody of the Seas. And it was a 7-day Caribbean vacation. And it all began on March 21st of 1998. That's the day that the ship departed from Puerto Rico. So it was just a couple of days into the cruise on March 23rd when the ship actually docks in Aruba, and the family, they got off in Aruba. They spent the day there, and then they got back onto the boat in the evening. And the next destination that it was heading to was the island of Curacao. So some of the information, I'm going to just kind of preface it. Some of the information in this timeline is different depending on which source you go to. So I've watched several, episodes of true crime shows. I've read online articles. I've listened to podcasts about this case, and it seems like every one I listen to has slightly different information regarding the timeline and times of day and when things happen. So I kind of tried to put it together in the most clear way that I could do it based on all the research, but just know that there's going to be other sources you might listen to or other podcasts that will have different dates or different times. So it's a little bit confusing that way. But so like I said, March 23rd, the ship docks in Aruba. The family spends the day in Aruba, and they get back onto the boat in the evening. And they spend the evening on the boat, and it was like a formal night on the ship. So the family all dressed up. The guys were wearing tuxes, and it was just sort of a formal event in one of the upscale restaurants. And during dinner, there were professional photographers that were kind of roaming around the event. They were taking photos of people, and then you could, go and purchase the photos later. So Amy's family sort of said since her disappearance and since this happened that night Amy was really kind of standing out. She was drawing significant attention from both passengers and crew members. And so, like I said, even though they were on the ship at this restaurant, the ship was actually still docked in Aruba. From some sources that I saw, the ship was still docked in Aruba, and it actually left late at night from Aruba, and it was going to be docking in Curacao early the next morning. So probably around 6 or 7 a.m. is when it was planned to dock in Curacao. So I guess when they're at dinner, a waiter had actually approached the table. So Amy and her brother Brad got up, left the table, and it was just Amy's parents there. And Amy's mother says that while they were sitting at the table, a waiter approaches them asking where Amy is. And, when they're wanting to know why you want to know where Amy is, the waiter says that he wanted Amy to join him and some other crew members on the mainland at a bar named Carlos and Charlie's. And Amy's mother was kind of sketched out by this, didn't really know what to say. But when Amy comes back to the table, Amy's mother tells her what this waiter had asked and had wanted. And Amy was like, no way, that's super creepy. I'm not going with these guys to this bar. So interesting fact is Carlos and Charlie. So that's actually, this bar would gain notoriety later as the last place that Natalee Holloway was seen before her disappearance in 2005. So obviously not related in this case, but just kind of a strange coincidence that this Carlos and Charlie's is with the bar that they wanted to take Amy to. And then like 7 years later, it becomes pretty well known as the place that Natalee Holloway would disappear from.
Yeah, like the exact same one, not because Carlos and Charlie's is like a franchise, but like this exact one in Aruba was where Natalee Holloway was as well.
Yeah, because it was in Aruba. So just kind of a creepy connection there. So yeah. But
yeah, and like we mentioned this in the Natalee Holloway case, like this bar was known to like attract like sketchy locals and like sketchy tourists. It was kind of like that kind of place. So sketchy.
Yeah. And obviously like Amy wouldn't have really known that detail, but just the ask was kind of creepy. Like to go off the boat with these random people that she never really met to this bar. Like that's a no-go just right away. And Amy clearly felt that it was creepy. She said she didn't want to go or whatever. And I actually watched a documentary or an episode of a true crime show, and they were interviewing Amy's mother. And it's here where she's kind of describing how this happened and how Amy and Bradley had left, and the waiter had come up to her and had wanted to do this. And she kind of told Amy once Amy came back what was asked. And she kind of said like, you're 23 years old, you can like do what you want, but you know, we're going to be leaving Aruba soon. The ship's going to be departing, and I don't want you to go off the ship so close to this and possibly miss the ship as we leave for Curacao or whatever. That's what the mother is describing in this interview. So that's how I think that detail of they're actually still docked at this time. The boat's not moving, but they're just on the ship at the restaurant. And they're going to be leaving for Curacao soon. So whether the details of that, it's like a little bit confusing based on the source you listen to, but for whatever reason, all that matters is that Amy said no. She didn't want to go with these guys. So after dinner, Amy and Brad decide to go to the nightclub that's on the ship. And so they do. And witnesses later reported that they saw Amy dancing and talking with members of the live band that was called Blue Orchid. And specifically, the bass player of that band, whose name was Alistair Douglas. He went by the nickname Yellow. So I'm going to be referring to him as mostly as Yellow. Moving forward. So there's actually video, like, of course, there was videographers and photographers there at the nightclub too. And there's actually some video that shows Amy and her brother dancing at the club. It also shows Amy dancing with Alistair Douglas and kind of shows, they're getting close and they're talking and she's up with talking with the band and all of that sort of stuff. So the Amy and her brother stay at the nightclub into the early hours of the morning. And Yellow claims that he left the club at around 1 a.m. and he left by himself. But when he left at 1, Amy and her brother was still there. So at approximately 3:30 a.m. on the morning of March 24th, that's when Brad decides to leave the club and go back to the family's cabin. And the ship's electronic door lock system actually confirms that Brad does re-enter their cabin at 3:35 a.m. and he's followed by Amy just 5 minutes later. So, by 3:40, 3:45, they're both back in the family's cabin, and Brad and Amy go and they spend some time just on the balcony talking. I think Amy's, smoking on the balcony and just, whatever. And so they're up for a little bit longer on the balcony there. So after some time, Brad decides to go to bed. And when he goes in, he leaves Amy still sitting outside on the balcony. The next thing in the timeline is at around 5:30 a.m. That's when their father, Ron, awakes. And he says that, like, through the glass door, he can see Amy's legs stretched out in a chair on the balcony. So he assumed that she had just fallen asleep outside on the balcony there. And he says that the balcony door was closed at that time and everything appeared normal. And he saw that Brad was in his bed. So he knew both of his kids were accounted for. They weren't still out at the nightclub or somewhere else on the ship. So he felt comfortable that they were both there. He went back to sleep. Then he says he woke up again approximately 30 minutes later and he noticed that something was different. This time the balcony door was open, halfway open, or open, and Amy was no longer there. He also says that her cigarettes and her lighter were the only two things that were missing, but her sandals and everything else that she had brought with her on the trip were still in the cabin. So it suggested that she might not have gone far, or anywhere that she went barefoot. And the only thing that she took with her were her cigarettes and her lighter. So Ron was obviously, kind of not necessarily alarmed right away, maybe, but just kind of wanted to know where she was. She didn't close the door when she went back in. And it was only half an hour from the last time he saw her. So in that half an hour, she had gotten up and left. And it's kind of weird that she would go barefoot or whatever, but he thought maybe she just went up to one of the decks up there or went to get coffee or whatever. So he begins searching the ship for his daughter. He's checking some of the common areas, but he's unable to locate her. And so he quickly alerts the rest of the family and they immediately report Amy missing to the ship's crew. And the timing here is critical because, like I said before, the ship was scheduled to dock in Curacao that morning, and the family really wanted or had hoped to initiate a full search before the passengers disembarked, because I think this is a critical time right here because you have everybody on the ship. So between the time that she was last seen and now, no one's gotten off the ship. Everyone's there. So if that's the kind of the prime time where you would want to maybe do a thorough search, you would want to do an announcement or something while everyone's there on the ship. As soon as you dock and people get out, then you're opening up a whole can of worms. People are leaving. It's a mess. So the family really wanted to be able to do something in that first time or that first bit of time before people started to leave. So the crew performed a brief and limited search of the ship, but didn't really halt operations or the docking process or the disembarkment process, or they didn't issue a ship-wide alert right at that time. And several sources that I've seen said that it was standard procedure that no matter what the situation was, they had to dock and people had to disembark at the scheduled stop. So they couldn't really, or they weren't in a position to be able to halt that process. They had to just do the standard procedure. So that's what they planned to do. And the crew eventually did do an announcement. I've read that it was around 7:50 a.m. is when they did an announcement over the intercom asking for Amy Bradley to report to the front desk or to the common area. But by this point, by the time that they had actually did the announcement, several passengers had already disembarked the ship. So they had docked and people had gone. And obviously Amy never did come to the front desk or to the designated place. So, like I said, once people get off the boat, it becomes significantly harder to track people or to do anything really, or to find her easily. So, believing that there was a possibility that Amy had left the ship in Curacao, the Bradley family got off the boat and they remained on the island searching frantically for any sign of her. They explored local areas and they contacted the authorities, but their efforts proved fruitless. Meanwhile, there was a 4-day search that was conducted by the local Coast Guard, which involved several helicopters and extensive sweeps of the surrounding waters, but tragically no trace of Amy was ever found. And with no new leads, the devastated family eventually did have to fly back to Virginia, forced to return home without Amy. So that was the events right around the time of her disappearance and initially kind of what happened. And initially the theory was that she had just fallen overboard accidentally. She maybe leaned too far over, fell overboard. The other theory was that she had intentionally went overboard, so she had committed suicide. And the family, says that that's not really even a possibility. The fact that she would commit suicide, because she had plans. She was very excited to go back to school for her master's. She was writing postcards to her friends and saying how great the trip was and how she looked forward to seeing them when she got back. So there was no real indication that she wanted to take her own life or that she would do that. So,
Yeah.
and
I
also
also heard that she had got a new job as well, that she was going to be starting when she got back. And also she had adopted a new puppy that she was going to get when she got back. So she had all these plans for the future. So it wasn't like she didn't have anything going for her. So that's another thing why people were like, well, no, she wasn't going to kill herself. She, there was no indication that she didn't have plans for the future.
Yeah. And I think that's the first thing that investigators really look at is if they assume that she committed suicide or they think that, it's kind of like, what did she have going on in her life at the time? Was she super sad or did she not have any forward looking plans? But that wasn't the case in this investigation. Like, she did have those plans. She was excited. There's no indication that she would want to commit suicide. So to me, that's not even a theory that should even be really considered. I mean, it has to be considered, of course, but not really one that should be really taken seriously. And
and I think because of the timeline, like when the last time she was seen by her father, they were super close to the next dock in Curacao. So if she did jump or if she fell overboard or somebody threw her overboard in that time, then yes, they think that her body would have washed up or she could have swam to shore because of how close they were to the shore. So it wasn't like they were in the middle of the ocean and she could have gone anywhere. It's like they think that they would have found her along the shores where they did all those searches if she had gone overboard so close to where they were docking. So that's another thing to think about as well.
Yeah, that's important. That's actually an important point too, because it's not like they were in the middle of nowhere. They were close to the next place. So doing a 4-day search, you would think something in that time would be found because she's close to, like you said, to shore at least. Right. So, and also it's just sketchy that it's like in that 30-minute window between 5:30 when he saw her laying on the balcony chair and then half an hour later, she's gone. So that's it's just crazy how in cases like that crucial 30 minutes, like how much can really happen in 30 minutes, but apparently quite a lot. So it's just super, super scary and super sketchy. So the next part of this, I'm going to get into obviously the investigation and also some more sketchy things that had happened on the ship and some alleged sightings, because it's really the alleged sightings of Amy since she had disappeared that really makes that case for that there was foul play involved, much more obvious. Because if it had been a case of like no one had ever seen her, there was never a report of any other alleged sighting since then you could say, okay, maybe she had gone overboard somehow. But the fact that there are alleged sightings in the years since makes it a compelling case for sure. So as the investigation unfolded, there were two witnesses that came forward with significant claims. So one witness states that they had actually seen Amy with Alistair Douglas or Yellow, a member of the ship's band, between 5:30 a.m. and 5:45 a.m. She says she saw them, or they say that they saw them on a elevator, like a glass elevator or something, going up to the nightclub. So she said she saw this person who matched her description with this guy who matched Yellow's description heading back to the nightclub at 5:30 and 5:45 a.m. This timeline does kind of coincide with the moment that her father Ron last saw Amy on the balcony. So he says it was 5:30 that he saw her laying there. So, and then this witness is saying between 5:30 and 5:45 is when she sees him. So if that was Amy that this witness saw, she got up from that balcony chair very shortly after her father saw her, gets up and leaves. It's kind of weird that she would go barefoot and not like she didn't have any shoes with her when she left because all of her shoes were still there in the room. So why she wouldn't put on shoes is kind of weird, but who knows? Maybe she had made plans, like when she was hanging out with Yellow at the nightclub, maybe they had made plans to meet up at a specific time or something back at the nightclub. So maybe that was always her intention and she did do that. If this person that this witness saw was Amy. So another witness claims that they saw Amy with Yellow at around 6 a.m. and observed him giving her a dark colored drink, which could have been coffee. So not necessarily anything sketchy. It could have just been something simple as coffee. So these accounts kind of deepened suspicions around Yellow, but no conclusive evidence ever linked him to Amy's disappearance. And the lack of immediate action by the ship's crew and the incomplete search procedures on board became central points of criticism. And it really left Amy's family wondering whether more could have been done to find her in those critical early hours. Like I said, if they just did an announcement earlier, before anyone had left the ship in Curacao, the outcome could have been very different. And one suspicious thing that did happen as well was that Amy's brother Brad says that Yellow had approached him and he said that he was very sorry to hear about Amy's disappearance. But at the time that he said this to Brad, it was really only the family and a few crew members who were aware of the disappearance. This was before they made that full announcement that went out that morning. And Yellow was apparently or allegedly questioned by the police and was given a polygraph, which he passed. And he was never really officially considered a person of interest in this case because, like I said, no evidence of involvement ever came to light. But it is kind of sketchy that he would come up and seem to have knowledge that she was missing before most people would have knowledge. But I was thinking it could be possible that he overheard crew members talking. He could have been, within earshot of when the family reported it to crew. Like, we don't know that necessarily. Like, obviously, if witnesses say that they saw someone who matched his description around 5:36, he was awake and up at that time. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that he could have overheard the crew talking about something, right? So it's not necessarily saying that he is guilty of something, but it just kind of struck Brad as very odd that he seemed to know before most people.
But yeah, I think he told the police, though, that the crew had come and told him early on, asked if they had seen her because they knew that he was with her or something, but that still, the timeline still didn't add up or something because it would have been later than when he had approached Amy's father or something, when they would have talked to him. But then also, if he did overhear, why wouldn't he just say that? Like, oh, I overheard them super early talking about it. Like, you said as a defense if that's what actually happened. But I don't know. It's just kind of weird that is like, people think that maybe he overheard, but like, why didn't he just admit that he overheard it?
Yeah, instead of like leaving it ambiguous of like not explaining
like,
at all how you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also, wouldn't Brad have asked? Wouldn't it be like, how do you know? I would have. I mean, maybe not. I guess you're not.
Well,
really
I think because it came out later, like, yeah, he wasn't thinking about that at the time. And it's like, and then when he was thinking about it and it was questioned later, that's when Brad was like, oh, that actually timeline doesn't work out. So he wasn't thinking about that at the time. But it was like later when he was like, oh, actually, he shouldn't have known then. So you probably wouldn't have asked because
Yeah.
he just didn't realize at the time, I guess.
I guess that makes sense because you could think like your mind, you know what's happening. You're kind of amped up because your sister's missing and everything. And then when someone asks you, you're not thinking, how do you know? No one else knows. It's like, you know, so that's all you know. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know that it's happening. So if someone says that they're sorry, you just
Yeah.
automatically think, oh, thank you. It's only
Yeah.
later
And
you're like,
and you know
how
you've
did
talked
you
to
know?
like the some of the crew about it already. So it wouldn't be weird that somebody else knew. But then when he's thinking about it later, it's like, why would he wouldn't have any reason to know that actually? So yeah,
Yeah.
it is kind of sketchy.
Yeah. So sketchy at the very, very least. But like I said, he was never considered a person of interest and no evidence ever came out that he was involved. So as the family reflected on their days on board, they recalled certain incidents that seemed odd at the time, but grew much more suspicious in hindsight. So, like I said, that instance where the waiter had come up and asked where Amy was, and that they wanted to take her out to that bar in Aruba. Um, and also another strange occurrence that involved the cruise ship's photography service. So this one's really, really weird. So like I said, there were professional photographers kind of roaming around at this restaurant, and they had taken several pictures of Amy and her family, as they did with many other passengers. And then they posted them on like this display board, which you can go and you can see them, and then you can buy the pictures if you want. Allegedly, all the photographs of Amy were removed from the board approximately 9 to 10 hours before her disappearance was officially reported, which is a detail that is very sketchy. So I think it was Amy's mother said that she went shortly after the pictures had been taken, she went to see them, and she couldn't find any pictures of Amy. Like, all of the ones of Amy were not there, but all the other pictures from other people that had been taken were getting posted, but all of Amy's were gone. So that to me is a major red flag.
Yeah, and like the photographer even said he remembered printing out those pictures and putting all the pictures of Amy with the rest of her family's pictures, and like he didn't even understand why they weren't there. So yeah, it's like another detail that makes you kind of think, well, this whole thing was like organized. Amy was like targeted, and now they stole her pictures to, like, I don't know, distribute, or my thoughts go to like, oh, like here's pictures of her to like make fake IDs for her like super quick so that she can get through security and stuff like that, and like pass borders because she has this ID. Anyway, that's speculation, but you never know.
Yeah, I never actually even thought of the fake ID part. I was just thinking, like, if somebody's on the ship working for this other group or something, they're like taking photos. They're taking Amy's photos to show this group, to be like, how about this person? Like, is this person?
Yeah, or like, this is who we're taking, so like look out for her when you see her. This is like who we have. So yeah, it's sketchy. So it's so scary to think about.
So yeah, so sketchy. And so I think, yeah,
also,
it was
another
Amy's mother
thing,
who.
you think of like Yellow could have been involved in this whole thing, and maybe he's like part of this ring, and he like does this to like multiple people on on cruise ships. But like, apparently he was fired after this because he was fraternizing or getting too close to the passenger. So whether he had done this in the past and like they actually just fired him because it was a big thing now, so they're like, okay, you got to go, or if this was coincidentally this was the first time he had ever like really done this, and she had gone missing, and then they fired him, so he really had nothing to do with it. So it wasn't like this was a continual thing afterwards either. So apparently he was like let go because of his involvement. So that's just a detail to think about.
Yeah, and it could have been something totally innocent too. Like, maybe he was just unlucky that it happened to be that same night she goes missing. Like, he could have just been kind of flirting with her, or like being maybe a little bit creepy, but like not having any horrible intentions and not involved in any way. But it just so happens that she goes missing very shortly after. So I don't know, just sketchy all around. And I think it was Amy's mother that said that she went and saw that all the pictures of Amy were gone. But that was before I think she had disappeared, maybe. But then it was sort of after she put all the pieces together of like why her pictures were missing right away, even though all the other photos, like you said, that the photographer took at the same time, or if other people were all there, but hers were gone. So that to me is like the one detail that I can't really overlook or get over. Like, that to me is extremely sketchy and obviously points to foul play. That doesn't just happen. Well, just a coincidence. All of her photos just went missing. Like, to me, that's not. It has to be connected.
I know, it's so weird. Yeah. So when you put that in with like all these other little things that are happening, it's like you can kind of see like this timeline of them like planning her abduction, which is super scary.
Yeah, like, to me, I think was that waiter involved? Like maybe the waiter was involved and was trying to get her to go with him off the ship to this bar where people would be waiting and they could abduct her that way. So maybe I was thinking the waiter was involved in some or other crew members. Because also, like I said, it grew a lot of attention that the crew didn't really do much at the beginning when they first got alerted of the disappearance. Like they said, we can't do a full announcement. We can't stop the docking process or the disembarkment. Like people have to get off. So that was also kind of came under scrutiny of like, why is the crew not doing anything at all? Is it that they want whoever has Amy to get off the boat with her or whatever it was, but they just didn't seem too concerned. So that did grow up, like kind of did sort of raise a lot of red flags for the crew as well, or towards the crew. And so, like I said, there were some alleged sightings or several alleged sightings of Amy since she went missing. So there was a taxi driver in Curacao that actually reported seeing a woman who matched Amy's description. And this woman had approached him to ask where she could find a phone. And one of the true crime documentaries that I saw on this case, or an episode of a show, allegedly this sighting was the morning that people had disembarked the ship in Curacao. So it would have been right after she does get off the boat. But he never said anything that she was with anyone else, or he just saw this woman come up to him and ask where the nearest phone was. So maybe she had escaped from this person who she was with and was trying to find. And obviously, this is the 90s, so not everyone has a cell phone or whatever. So you're just have to find a payphone or a phone. So he says that she had asked him where the nearest phone was. Then the next alleged sighting is in August of 1998. So this would have only been, 4 or 5 months after she went missing. There's a Canadian tourist named David Carmichael who claims that he saw a woman who resembled Amy on a beach in Curacao. And he noted that her tattoos, which this woman had a tattoo of a Tasmanian devil that was spinning a basketball, and that was on her shoulder. And she also had a tattoo of a gecko on her stomach. These both matched tattoos that Amy had. So that was, alarming that he had these details of the tattoos that he saw, and Amy had the same one. So it's likely that it was Amy. And so David says that he described her as being accompanied by 2 men who appeared intimidating. He said that Amy attempted to get his attention, but that the 2 men she was with quickly intervened. And this tourist does say that one of these men does resemble Alistair Douglas or Yellow, although this connection was never verified. So obviously they probably showed this guy a photo of Yellow, and he said, yes, that looks similar to one of the guys that she was with. So do you think that woman was Amy? First of all, do you think this account was true? And B, if it is, do you think that was Amy? I just want to ask you.
I think it does seem credible, like especially when they like the tattoos, like that's nobody else, the chances of somebody else having this exact same tattoos is, super slim. Yeah, I guess like did she know that about the tattoos before she reported it, and that's why she was like, oh, it matches, or she like found out later that, oh, actually that does match Amy, like the tattoos, like that. I'm not sure about that, but you know what I mean? It was like, oh, I saw this woman, she had these tattoos, and then they're like, oh, that matches Amy. Or was it like, oh, these tattoos that match Amy, I'm gonna go report it.
Yeah, I don't know either. Like, yeah, I don't really know the details of that timeline. So yeah, whether he thought it was a sketchy situation just overall, not even thinking it's Amy, but just saw this sketchy situation of this woman with 2 men, and they were intimidating, and she was trying to get his attention, and then reported it, and then it came out that they either showed him a photo. I mean, because this, like I said, this is about 4 or 5 months after she disappeared. So I'm assuming there would have been some sort of like missing persons posters or something around the area. So maybe he saw, I don't know what came first, whether he saw a photo of her and then saw her on the beach and was like, that's her, or just reported it separately and then when questioned about it said, oh, it could have been or something. I don't know.
Yeah. But I guess it doesn't really matter. But to me, if like I feel like you see something and you're looking out for that, you can like your mind can kind of be like make things up. You like a confirmation bias kind of thing. It's like, oh, I know what I'm looking for, and then you kind of think you see that even if you really don't. So I feel like if he saw something first and then it happened to match, then that seems a little bit more credible than having seen what he's looking for first and then being like, oh yeah, I did. That does match. Like either way, it could still be true, but yeah, just I don't know, just curious about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just super sketchy at the very least. And obviously, I don't have this guy David Carmichael doesn't really have a reason to lie. So it's not, I don't think necessarily he's lying, but like you said, yeah, confirmation bias. If you knew some information first and then just kind of applies it to the situation, even if it's not related, that could be what happened. So yeah, I don't really know the timeline in terms of like what he knew when he saw her versus what he didn't, and then just put the pieces together later. I'm not really sure, but it does seem kind of, a compelling lead that she's with these two guys. He says one of the guys resembled Yellow, but obviously it's never been confirmed and we don't really know for sure. And then there was another potential sighting in January of 1999. So this would have been still under a year after she went missing, about 10 months. There was a U.S. Navy officer who was visiting a brothel in Curacao. And he claims that he encountered a woman who identified herself as Amy Lynn Bradley. The woman reportedly told him that she was being held against her will and that someone was holding her papers. So I guess meaning they had confiscated her identification documents or something of that nature. He says that she begged for help, but the officer who was concerned about being discovered in a brothel, he didn't act at that time. So he didn't say anything. He was afraid that he'd get in trouble for even being there. So just kept quiet. And it was later that he contacted the Bradley family because he saw Amy's photo in like on a missing persons ad or in a magazine or something, and put it together at that time that was the woman. He saw her name and he saw her face, and he's like, that's the woman I saw, because she said that was her name. However, there were questions that did arise about the validity of his sighting, because reports did indicate that Amy's travel documents were accounted for after her disappearance. So he says that this woman said that they were holding her papers. That was a quote I saw, holding her papers, quote. So I don't really know what that means or whatever, but there wasn't that kind of a consistency, because her passport, I think, was still in the cabin after she went missing. Like none of her stuff was gone. So yeah, but maybe it's like a fake identification. It could be fake papers or something. I don't even know, but yeah.
Yeah,
it's
and
kind of
Amy might not know that either. Like she might not know that they don't actually have her real passport and stuff. Like they could have told her we have it all. So
yeah, that's true. Because yeah, they're not going to say that we have your fake ID. They're not going to tell her everything, right? They're going to make her think that they have everything. And it's also just infuriating that this person didn't say anything at the time. He was just, like I said, afraid to be even caught in a brothel, so he didn't want to say anything. And of course, you tell them years later, which it's like, okay, that's useful information, but it doesn't help us now necessarily. Especially if this is years later or whatever.
Well, and they did go check out that brothel, and it had burned to the ground, so it really wasn't much help at all. So yeah. And like another thing I think that makes it kind of credible, like Curacao was like even now, I think, and back in the 90s, like prostitution is legal in like some of those Dutch Caribbean countries. And yeah, and so it's like prostitution's legal and it's regulated by the government. And so it's much more prevalent, and like obviously like you're allowed to do it, but obviously sex trafficking is still not legal, but that's like makes these countries like a hub for where you would want to sex traffic people, because you can prostitute them legally. And so yeah, like places like Curacao became like sex tourism destinations for people, and yeah, kind of like a hot spot for like these illegal sex trafficking, which I think kind of makes the sighting of her in one of these brothels, which a brothel is still illegal, I think, but just because prostitution is legal there, like it kind of makes it more credible that this would be like a destination where you would want to kidnap somebody and sex traffic them, kind of. So it just makes it a little bit more like believable, I think.
Yeah, that's true. And also it's kind of weird. Like prostitution is legal there, but a brothel isn't. It's kind of weird. But yeah, that's a good point, and it's not it's not a leap of logic to say that. Yeah, like that is a hub for that kind of activity because it's legal and more like accepted there. So yeah, definitely. It's not like surprising that if person could have been Amy, and the fact that he says that she identified herself as Amy Bradley, so it's not like he just saw her and thought she looked like her. It's like the fact that she actually came to him and said that was her name made it a little bit more compelling. But Yeah, well, before we recorded this, I was thinking, if she said they were holding her papers, but we know they didn't have her papers, and I was like, is this a real account? But then when you said they're not going to tell her everything, if she thinks that they're holding her papers, then that's all that matters. If she said that, so I do believe this is a credible thing, and just super annoying that he wouldn't have said it at the time, and he only tells them a long time after when you can't really do
Yeah,
anything.
because like he didn't have any idea who she was, and like he didn't know what was going on. But I guess she's like begging for his help, and he still doesn't do anything. Like I don't know, it is like frustrating. And like another thing that came up, like why people think that she was kidnapped off the cruise ship in Curacao was because I guess maybe this probably happened in all the locations, but um when all the passengers would go off the ship, that's when like the crews would come in and like do all the laundry and do all the cleaning. And so they would take like all the big laundry carts like off the ship. And so people are thinking that if she was, maybe she was drugged and like hidden in these laundry carts. And so, and because this was like post or pre 9/11, and so people are saying, well, the security was lax and like people could actually get through the security without even being really checked. And so they're thinking she could be hidden in these laundry carts, that they weren't being thoroughly checked, and that's how she got through like the security borders in Curacao. Because like apparently even if you get off the ship, the cruise ship, like everyone had to go through customs to get onto like the islands and stuff. And that's one of the ways they could have like smuggled her on there or through there, was through these laundry carts that the crew had. So that's why people are thinking, oh, maybe the crew was involved. Or
But they
yeah,
wouldn't be
even if
taking the but they wouldn't be taking the laundry cart like through customs, would they?
no, I
Wouldn't
know,
that be suspicious? Like you're at customs with a huge laundry cart. Like why? Like to
I
me,
don't know
that's
if like all like the dirty laundry, maybe like I don't know, maybe they had, because this was like a stop that the ship would always make. Like they had like facilities set up to like put their dirty laundry and clean it and get new stuff, rather than having like these big like cleaning facilities on the ship. Maybe that's like that's where I'm thinking they had like a facility where they would like offload garbage and things, like garbage and dirty laundry, so they wouldn't have to keep it on the ship. You know what I mean? They would just bring it to the facility there, get fresh stuff brought on. I don't know if that's actually what happened, but that's just something that came up in one of these podcasts I was listening to, that could be a way that she had been smuggled off, was in these big like dirty laundry carts. Just a
mm,
theory,
that's
just an idea.
that's. I think that would be would be a potential of how she got off the ship in the first place. Like if she was drugged and put in there to get her off the ship without any suspicion, but then
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
yeah, and then getting through customs, maybe she wasn't drugged for that. Like if they had made a fake passport for her, she could have just gone.
Yeah.
That
Like when I
doesn't
say
sound like that.
customs, I mean like, because according to like this, I think it was the Case File podcast I was listening to, every destination that you get off, like they'd have to always go through like this customs as if it was at the airport. And like, so they get off the ship in Curacao, have to go through like this customs, and that's how they get onto the island, kind of thing. And they probably have to go back through customs, so they're not taking anything with them onto the ship that they shouldn't be. And they aren't smuggling anything off the ship onto the island. So they did have to go through customs every time they got off the ship. So that's what I mean when I say they smuggled her through customs in this laundry bin. As soon as they got off the ship, somebody just went
Yeah,
through. Yeah. I don't know
yeah,
if that's
that's
credible, but that's like
creepy.
it's just one of the theories out there.
It's definitely possible. I mean, like if the crew was involved, like they know the process, they know how things work, so they would know easy ways, and they have been on the cruise multiple times. They know like what things they check for at customs, what things they don't, or how things. So it's not unbelievable that they would know. Like they could very easily do that
Yeah,
if they
and
knew that
like
that would
someone
be.
could have slipped something in her drink, one of her drinks, and then she's just kind of like really like passed out or disoriented, and it wouldn't have been hard for them to, get her in some way into one of these things, or even past security if she was like not really with it, not when it was going on, right? So it's possible.
But also, my question would be also just why would she have left her room to begin with? I mean, I guess anyone can leave the room for any other number of reasons, but she left barefoot and didn't take anything, just her cigarettes and her lighter. So there was also another something I saw too in another article, that there was a witness who said that they saw a woman who looked like her with cigarettes and a lighter going into the elevator. I don't know if that's credible or not, but I don't know. I just feel like it's like, how did they get her out of the room if like they had this plan where they're going to kidnap her? Do you think people came into the room? I don't think so, because her whole family's there. So it's easier to like get her out. So that's why I'm thinking like maybe if, not saying Yellow was involved, but like if he was, it's like he had made a plan. Okay, you're going to meet me here at 6 a.m. or 5:45 here. And then she would go. And then that's where like people would drug her or whatever.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, why would she leave her room? I don't know. I mean, I guess she could have just left, like I said, for any reason, but.
Well, yeah. And if she was like drinking and stuff, like she just could have left without her shoes. I mean, not thinking about that, and just took her cigarettes and left to meet him. Or meet somebody. Or she just wanted to go for a little walk. I don't know. But I feel like her leaving without her shoes is not that hard to believe. I don't think somebody came into her room and snatched her, because that would be way too risky. Somebody, like, she could have been waiting for somebody. They could have like knocked on her door. But then if somebody saw her by herself on the elevator after that, I don't know. It's weird. Yeah, that piece is like super, like, why did she leave her room is a huge mystery.
Yeah. It's like, and it's like, you could say maybe she just wanted to go up to the upper decks to like have a cigarette, but she could have done that on the balcony. Like she was already outside on a balcony. She could have done that. But I guess she just wanted to go to the upper deck. But like, I don't know. To me, I mean, it's gross to not take your shoes, but I guess it's not like unbelievable that you wouldn't. But
I mean, if you're drinking, I mean, I've walked home in bare feet before with no shoes. So, I mean, yeah, I know it is gross. But anyway, let's maybe cut that out. But like she could have like it was early morning. She'd been drinking. She wanted to go get like some coffee or something, and she just got up and went to do whatever she was going to do. So I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, super weird. Anyway, so there was another alleged sighting of her that happened in the fall of 1999. So this would have been a year and a half later. There's a man named Frank Jones who contacts the Bradley family with an astonishing claim. Frank says that he is a former special forces operative, and he alleged that there were Colombian gangsters who were holding Amy captive in Curacao, and he assured the family that he could rescue her. His story gained credibility when he described Amy's tattoos in detail and also mentioned a lullaby that she had sung, and this was a lullaby that her mother had taught her as a child. So the family believed him, and so the family then paid him over $200,000 for his assistance. They say that Jones sent the family a photograph of a woman resembling Amy, which further convinced them of this story. And he instructed them to fly to Florida and await his call while he conducted the rescue operation. So they go to Florida, and then they were waiting there for about a week without any updates. But then the family does get contacted by one of Jones' associates, who revealed that the entire operation was a scam. This associate claims that he was another one of Jones' past victims and wasn't a co-conspirator in this scam, but that's how we knew it was a scam, because it had happened to him before. Jones was then arrested and charged with mail fraud. He ended up spending 5 years in prison, and it was revealed that he had never been part of special forces. So the family's hopes were dashed, along with the resources that they had poured into this false promise of a rescue. So this guy is just a loser, a scumbag.
Yeah, what a loser. So that picture he had of Amy, was that just like a doctored picture that he had like photoshopped, or like what?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could have just been a picture of anyone who slightly resembled her.
I guess,
because he said
tattoos. I guess he like put the tattoos on himself. Like,
well, he described the tattoos. The picture didn't have the tattoos in it.
Oh,
I don't think. I think he like described to the family the tattoos, and then said that he knew a cook who knew her, or who had seen her, and she was singing a lullaby that her mother had taught her. So
I don't know, because I've heard that like the family wanted proof that he had eyes on her, so he gave them pictures of Amy, and then they recognized the tattoos and they recognized her in the picture, and were like, yeah, that's why they went forward. They're like, okay, let's do this, because that is her.
Oh, okay.
So
that could be the case. I just the thing I saw just said that the tattoos and this lullaby is what convinced the family, but it didn't say details of how the tattoos, like how they knew that, if the picture had the tattoos or if he had just said that she had the tattoos. I don't know, but I don't know where that picture came from. Like, if because what I saw or read was that he said that they needed to pay him like a certain amount of money, like $100,000 or whatever, and then he would start conducting surveillance. So that's when he would then presumably go and like take these photos. That's when he took that photo of Amy, I guess, allegedly Amy, and then he presented it to them and then used that to get them to send him more money for the actual rescue
Okay,
mission.
so the timeline I heard was that they had given him like $24,000 for him to like start the investigation and get close enough to her and stuff. And then that's when he said he found her and that he had proof that like who she was with. And that's when they're like, well, we need proof that you actually found her. That's when he sent them the pictures. And he's like, I can get a crew together to rescue her, but I need $100,000. But that's when they were like, well, we're not giving you $100,000 until we have proof. And that's why he gave them those pictures. They saw her and were like, okay, this is legit. And that's why they gave him all that money. So, but it actually turned out it wasn't true. So I don't know how he got the pictures, but the
But were
family
they
like
actually
legit
of
saw the
Amy?
pictures. I don't know. That's the family saw them and
Yeah.
thought that they looked enough like her, and they saw the tattoos that they were like, yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah. So it was like whether it was photoshopped or it was just a picture of someone else, a real picture, but it was just of someone else who resembled. Because by this time, her picture would have been everywhere, right? Like, it's very easy to know what she looks like, and then you just have to find someone who looks somewhat like that and pass it off as her. So yeah, I don't know how that. It's just sketchy. Anyway, this guy's a loser either way. So
It
he's just
almost
a
kind of sounds
scammer.
like he did see her, like he did find her, actually had real pictures, but then once he got the $100,000, he just like fucked off and was like, "No, I'm not going to do anything," which would be like
Yeah.
extra shitty.
That's true. And either like so he scammed them either way. I don't know, but that would have whether his story of it being Colombian gangsters that stole her or that had abducted her. I don't know how true that was, or I don't know. It's just a loser, a sketchy loser. Anyway, and who ended up going to jail and pleading guilty to it. So, um, yeah. So that was just like be horrible for the family to have to go through that of like having this hope. And also like if you're paying, the fact that they paid him that money meant that he had such a believable story and was able to provide the things that they needed him to provide. So it's like you really getting your hopes up at this point. It's not like they're just so desperate they're sending you money without any sort of reason to believe it's true, but the fact that he was able
Yeah.
to like have all this
Yeah,
stuff.
he put a lot
I
of
mean,
work into that scam. It's like, why not put a lot of work into actually doing something instead of being a fucking idiot?
yeah.
Like actually
No,
look into trying to find her rather than putting all
I
this work
know.
into pretending. Like it's just it's crazy.
So annoying. I know. So if people spend half the time doing something legitimate, we could be far ahead, much more farther ahead as a society in this world. Um, so yeah, just a loser. So that lead didn't go anywhere, and it cost the family a lot of money, unfortunately. So then there's another alleged sighting in 2005, and this is when a woman named Judy Maurer, she was in Barbados, and she recounted an encounter. She recounted a chilling encounter in a restroom. She said that she entered a stall when she heard two men enter and confront a woman in the other stall. And after the men left, Judy says that she approached the visibly frightened woman who was hunched over the bathroom sink. She says that the woman introduced herself as Amy and mentioned that she was from Virginia. So before Judy could ask any further questions, the two men returned, this time forcing Amy to leave with them. And Judy reported the incident, but despite an investigation, no further leads were uncovered. That's a super compelling lead as well. The fact that I don't think she said her full name, but the fact that her name was Amy and she was from Virginia. And there was these two men again. Remember that tourist said that he saw her with two men as well. So were these the same two men? Who knows? But like that's super credible. And by this point, this was 2005, so this would have been like 7 years after she had gone missing. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many Amy's from Virginia are super scared of these two men that are with her. And I don't know. I mean, it could be a coincidence, but I don't tend to think it is.
And where was that again? The sighting? Was that in Curacao again?
Um, I read it was in Barbados. The source I said was
Okay.
Barbados.
Okay.
But again, sometimes like it's like I said, different sources have different information, so I don't know which one is how to corroborate that or which one is the true one. But it happened. But whether I saw it was Barbados. But if someone else finds something else that's conflicting with that, it's possible.
And that's still like in the Caribbean islands,
Yeah,
right? So it's still like in the same area. So
yeah. So sketchy. And I think it was I think it was a department store restroom. Is also what I saw. So I don't know what department store, but a department store. So weird. And I believe it's probably legitimate. And that probably was Amy, but yeah. And then later that same year, so also 2005, there was an organization dedicated to helping victims of human trafficking. And this organization contacted Amy's family, and they had discovered some photographs online of a woman called Jazz on a website for human trafficking, I guess, some gross, disgusting website. But the woman bore a striking resemblance to Amy, and upon seeing the images, Amy's parents became convinced that it was her. So I'm actually going to be sharing my screen for this part because I do have the photos I do have the photos here. And I just wanted to show them just so that if you're watching the video version of this, you'll be able to see the pictures here. But if you're just listening to the audio, we'll put a link to the images in the show notes. You can still take a look at them.
Yeah. But, and apparently the family like showed these photos to like photo experts or like, you know, people that are experts in aging photos and things, and they said that it's very likely that it could be the same person, like an actual photo of Amy and then this photo. So yeah.
So this so you'll see the image here on the video version of this. So the image on the right is the photo from that website of this woman named Jazz, and then the one on the left is Amy, a photo of Amy that was taken on the boat before she went missing. Do you think to me it didn't really, like, when I first saw it, I'm like, it doesn't really look like her at all. But if the family's convinced, I mean, who am I to say I don't think it is? If the family is convinced it is, and those experts say that they believe it very well could be the same person, it's just really sad.
Like if I came across that photo of Amy on the right there, I wouldn't instantly be like, oh, that looks like her. But when like side by side, you're comparing them. I mean, there are some resemblances for sure. Like definitely like her cheeks, like her cheekbones and stuff. They look really similar. Her nose isn't that far off. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard because like obviously she's older and just been through some stuff.
Yeah. So like this is like 2005. So this would have been 7 years. So she's what, 30 by this point? This person in this photo looks older than 30, but I guess like she's been through some stuff. If she's been like, you know,
like sex trafficked
a lot,
drugged,
like I feel like that ages you.
Yeah, it's definitely like stressful this whole time. Just
and obviously she just has longer hair, but it's been 7 years, so I think like at first when I looked at it, I'm like, well, that doesn't really look like her. But obviously, I mean, 7 years later, she has longer hair. Some of her features do look very similar. And I guess, like I said, if her family is convinced that it's her, I mean, I feel like you would know your own daughter if you saw her. But also, I don't know how much of that is like just wanting it to be. Or I don't know if you want it to be. What's worse, if that is her and then she's on this website, that's pretty horrible. I don't know if you would rather that or if you would rather her.
Yeah, but like hope that she's still alive, right? So
yeah. So I don't know. It's like very easily could be her. And it's just like super sad if it is. I mean, either way, even if it's not her, it's a woman who is on a sex trafficking website. So regardless of who it is, it's still horrible and sad. But if it's Amy, I don't know. But yeah,
super sad.
Super sad. So the family was, like I said, pretty convinced that it was her when they first saw it. And unfortunately, obviously, they brought this lead forward. Investigators were unable to trace the website's origins or identify who was operating it. So this was another promising lead that didn't really go anywhere. And this is, I believe, as far as I know, the only like photos we have connected to the case that might be her. And obviously, it's not confirmed whether it is or not. So these sightings were combined with previous reports do paint a very troubling picture. It seems increasingly likely that Amy had been abducted and forced into the sex trade. And while, you know, you could say if it was just one potential sighting or maybe two potential sightings, you could say, okay, maybe they were mistaken. they thought it wasn't. But the fact that you have like, what's this, 4 or 5, and they're all unconnected people who just came forward with this information makes it kind of increasingly likely that that is what happened, and that she was sold into the sex trade. So yeah, and like I said, really there is only like from the first couple of theories of either it was an accidental, she fell over accidentally, she fell overboard, or she committed suicide, or there's foul play. That's really the only thing I think when they start an investigation, it's one of 3 things: accidental, suicide, or foul play. And if it is foul play, there was also the 2 options of, so either she was met with foul play, like was killed on the boat and just thrown overboard, or foul play where she was abducted and sold into the sex trade. So I think it's obvious that it's probably the 3rd option of foul play. I think we can rule out the accidental, overboard, and suicide.
Yeah, I agree. Also, like, it's not like someone could just like topple overboard randomly on these ships. Like, obviously they make them so that you can't just fall over the railing, because the railings are high enough. You'd actually have to be trying to climb up on them on purpose, which seems to be unlikely. And it also came up that there was like kind of this ledge underneath. So if you did like kind of fall by mistake, this ledge would catch you before you fell into the water. And there was something else, another point I wanted to make, which I will have to get back to.
And yeah, because I was like,
oh, the weather. They said like if you could be leaning overboard, or you could be leaning over the ledge and like looking, and then if like the weather was really bad, like a wave or like just the ship being super unsteady could like kind of knock you over. But they said that the weather and the seas were super calm all this whole time, so that's not an option either. So falling overboard by mistakes just seems super unlikely.
And like, what would have like, and it's not like she fell overboard if like it was a massive wave or something, and like she like fell, like no one else felt it, family didn't feel it, like, you know, that's not option either. So I think it's just obvious that she was met with foul play, and it's just a matter of like who was involved. And I think the crew was involved. Someone on the crew,
yeah,
or someone
like another thing that you didn't bring up, which makes me think that maybe the crew was involved, and this is kind of like a thing that they do, was there was somebody there that was doing like a promotional video, and so they were taping like the parties and the crew and like the people just for like you know, promotion. And this guy had video of Amy and Yellow together and stuff, and so when it's like when her disappearance came out, because they knew that this guy had footage of, you know, Amy with one of their crew, the head of security, I think, or the head of the crew had asked this guy for his like raw video, his like master's copies of this tape. And he's saying, well, no, I can give you like a copy. I'm not going to give you like the actual masters, because I don't give that to anybody. And the crew was like, well, the FBI is going to want it, so just like give it to me. And he's like, well, if the FBI wants it, then the FBI can contact me. And then he said that the FBI never reached out to him. Nobody ever talked to him about it again. That the head of security never talked to him about it again. So it was kind of like this guy's attempt to get these tapes from him so that there wouldn't be other evidence out there. But yeah, apparently the FBI didn't want them because they never asked for these tapes. But it also comes out because this guy obviously saw his own tapes, and there's no like nothing on them that would show any kind of foul play. But I think like this security guy just wanted them to make sure that there was nothing on there that was incriminating. So that's just another sketchy piece as well.
So sketchy. So sketchy. There's so many, like, which we went over, like all of those, like that thing you just mentioned, and then the fact that all the pictures were gone from Amy from the board. Like, to me, there had to be someone on the ship, whether it was a crew or just maybe even another passenger. Who knows?
Yeah. Oh, and another thing that also came up was like during that party, like the last time that Amy was seen like partying with Yellow, the cruise ship, obviously, like they hired like a dance crew and stuff, which then that dance crew came onto the ship from the island. Like they just boarded the ship from the island. They also brought like a group of locals with them just to like hang out and party on the ship. And which, Amy's family looking back thought was super weird. Like, why would this group of locals that aren't paying to be on there are just like on this ship now randomly? So it's like, who were those locals? Like, do they usually do that? Is this like another one of those things where it's like local people come on and they kidnap people and then leave? Like, it's super weird that this happened. So that was just like another piece of like these random local people from the island were now partying on the ship with the people that had paid to be there. So I don't know. That's just another weird piece.
That's super weird. Also, like a security concern. I guess she said it's pre 9/11, so I don't know. It's just super weird. Yeah, I don't know. So it could have been like totally not even related to crew or anyone on the boat. It was just these random locals that were on the ship that could have done something.
Yeah, like this could be a thing that, like, but it could be part of the whole plan, right? Like the people that they hire for this dance crew bring on these people that are going to traffic people from the thing, and everything was set up before then, and that's how they get them off, is with this group of people, these locals that wouldn't have to, like, I feel like they wouldn't even have to like check in. There's just like this random people on there and then they leave. So that could be another opportunity.
So
Like,
weird.
they didn't take her then, obviously, because they saw her after, but they could have been there scoping it out, kind of thing. I don't know. Weird.
But also, like, I was thinking like about the photographs too that went missing. Like the person behind, because my understanding it was like it just had like this desk where they had all of the photos up on this board. You can see them. Like, wouldn't they, if they're missing, like if someone came up and said, "Give me all the photos of this person," the person would have had to give over those photos, or was it the actual photographer who took them, who was in on it and just took them right when I don't know how that happened, or like, but you said I guess the photographer said that the other photos were there. Like he confirmed that the other photos were there. The others were just missing, and he didn't know what happened. But like also he could just say that. But like, was he?
Yeah. He also
Part
said
of
that
it?
he
And
would
like,
print another copy out again for the family of the ones of Amy. But then I never heard if he didn't do that or if he couldn't do that or what happened with those extra copies, if he actually made them or not. So yeah, that's like another piece. Like, how did those photos go missing in between him passing them over to a crew member? I don't know.
so I mean, it seems like a very well organized group of people that like have it all down to like they know, they have the full plan of, okay, this person's going to go in and do this, and then we're going to go and we're going to take the pictures here, we're going to take them, we're going to have her, like, that's the thing. Like, I think it had to be somebody that she was talking to who planned for her to meet them somewhere at that time in the morning, 5:30. Because to me, it's like, how if they're not going to go into her room and take her, they don't know she's coming out of her room at any particular time. How do they know that she's going to be where she's supposed to be? They need to grab her, right? Like, to me, it's clear, I think, that somebody was talking to her and told her to meet them at a certain time, because that's the only way you can guarantee, even then you can't guarantee it, but that's the only way you can have some sense of idea that she's going to be at a certain place at a certain time, because otherwise you don't know if she's coming out of her room for hours later. Like, you don't know. So to me, it's someone that she talked to that night had
Yeah.
to have
And to make sure she was by
made that
herself,
plan.
because, like, she's going to leave, but she's going to leave with like her family again. So like, how do you know she's going to be by herself? And that's kind of like a way to guarantee that. It's kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, a way to get her alone, which is
Yeah.
like, to me, it seems that the crew was trying to get her off the ship alone by trying to get her to go to that bar. And then when that plan didn't work out, they're like, okay, well, we need to get her somehow alone another way. So did they have Yellow? I don't know, because I mean, Yellow's the only one that there's been reports that they saw her talking to him, and he says he was talking to her, and there's like videos of them dancing, but like there's lots of other people at that nightclub that she could have been talking to that night who could have been completely different than, not even like,
Yeah, it's
Yellow
true.
might not
Like,
have been
Amy's
involved
mom
at
said she
all.
was, yeah. Amy's mom said she was getting lots of attention from like a lot of people on that ship, like a lot of the crew and stuff. So whether that was just coincidental or they just had this big plan, I don't know. It's crazy. And like, it's scary, the fact that she was seen afterwards, all these sightings like out in public, and they were just like sophisticated enough to be able to like scoop her away and just no trace of her again after that. Like, it's crazy. It's obviously well planned.
Yeah, and it's clear that she had people with her at all times, like that tourist who said he saw her on the beach with these two guys, and then that other woman in the restroom who said there were these two guys. So it's like, clearly she never really went anywhere alone. I guess the only time that, I think the only reporting where she would have been alone was, well, the brothel maybe, or that taxi driver who said that she came up to him and asked for a phone. But he didn't say anything about her being with two other men. So it was like, did she manage to get away from them for a quick minute? But why
It's
would she
weird.
go and say
That
like, hey,
story of
I
like
need
her
help?
with a taxi, like I heard a different version. I don't know if it was that same person or the same place, but I heard that someone spotted her again with two men who were kind of like trying to shove her into this, like kind of looked like a police car, maybe something official, like these two official men. And she kind of seemed like disoriented, like she didn't want to go with him, like she was struggling a little bit, and they just kind of like pushed her in, and then the car took off. So that was another sighting, whether it was her or not, but somebody had reported that as well in Carousel, I'm pretty sure. So again, ugh, who knows?
Yeah, that's it's crazy. And obviously, with all those sightings, you tend to believe that there's some credibility there. It's not just one unconfirmed sighting; it's multiple people who, like I said, are not connected to each other, who have
Yeah.
similar. Like I would guess that this person, Judy, in the restroom, wasn't like well read on the story, who like knew details, right? Like to me, so it's not like she's going to come up with this story that matches details from other stories. Like there's this woman named Amy from Virginia, and there's these two men who are with her. Like to me, that has to be something that genuinely happened, and that it was Amy. I don't know.
Yeah. And also the guy in the brothel, like that makes me think that it was legit too, even though it was years later. Like, why would he come forward and say that he was in a brothel illegally? And who wants to admit they're in a brothel anyway? And like for no reason, like he doesn't have any point. There'd be no point for him to like come forward and say that later, right? It would just like look bad on him, especially if he was just making it up, right? So that seemed to me that seems legit as well.
Yeah. Like to me, yeah, like that's the only thing where I think like all of the sightings, except for that Frank scammer guy, who obviously was clearly a scammer who got money out of them, but like the rest of them have nothing to gain by coming to the family with this information. I mean, we've talked in other cases where people are just weird and want to be like involved in the case or somehow, even if they have like people come and have false claims all the time that turn out to be false because they just are weird and want to be a part of the investigation or something. But it doesn't strike me as, especially when like that guy, like you said, the brothel, that would like be tarnishing to your reputation to like admit that.
Well, yeah,
Like
because he didn't want to come
make
forward at
up
the
a
time
story.
because he could get like in
Yeah.
trouble. And so why admit it later or say make it up if it wasn't true later kind of thing.
Yeah. And if you're
Yeah.
gonna make up something, you can make up another scenario. It wasn't in a brothel that you saw her. You could have just said you saw her on the street, like
Yeah.
other people that. So
Yeah.
like to me that is legit. And as far as I know, the only two sightings or alleged sightings that where she actually identified herself by name was Judy, the woman in the restroom, and this guy in the brothel who said that she said her name was Amy Bradley. So, and I just like, and Judy said that she said her name was Amy from Virginia. Like to me, that's a very big coincidence that she's from Virginia. Her name is Amy, and she's with two men who I don't know. So I tend to
It's so
believe all
sad
of
to
these
think like,
sightings.
well, yeah, and it's sad to think like even after all these years, like she's still trying to get out of the situation by like coming up to random people and like telling them her name and that she needs help, and she just still hasn't gotten it. Like it's just so sad that she's like still aware enough to be like, you know, like not completely brainwashed, right? She's like, so like I'm Amy from Virginia, I need help, and still isn't getting it. It's just sad.
Yeah, and I don't know if like the sighting with Judy in the restroom, like I don't know if she said I need help or anything like that. She just said her name was Amy. Like she looked frightened. Like Judy said she looked frightened and said her name was Amy, but she didn't say
Well, yeah,
like
and the two men like dragged
help
her
me or
out, so obviously there was something going on.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's super
Yeah.
it's super scary to even think about. And I was thinking too, like for like if someone it's kind of and if you're a creeper, gross, like abductor or criminal, it's like when you think about it, like what I was sort of hinting to before, like it's kind of an ingenious plan to like have someone on the boat, like doing that and then like feeding information to other people who are then coming up with this elaborate plot. Like it's just, and then it makes you think when all of the other people who go missing from cruise ships are like those weird stories. Like, is this is probably something that does happen a lot. I feel, I don't know. But is this something, I mean, I haven't heard of other ones quite like this, but like when you think about it, it would be very easy for someone to do that. Maybe not now in a post 9/11 where like people, random locals can't come just on the boat randomly. Like that would never happen now, I think. But you could have someone who's like in a band who plays on the ship, who's like really just working and trying to find people for this gross criminal thing. Like it makes you think like it could happen very easily, which is the scary thing.
Yeah, I think it still happens, but it's just like they've just gotten it down to a T that you just don't see the people that go missing. You don't see the sightings of them because they've got it so locked down that you'd never see them again because they just know what they're doing now, which is so scary. And so when you think of when someone goes missing, like this is like worst case scenario. It's like kidnapped and then like sex slavery, forced for the rest of their life kind of thing. Like that to me is like worst case scenario.
Yeah. It's crazy to think. And I mean, I was trying to like look, like I said, there's lots of cases of people who go missing from cruise ships, but just makes you wonder, like, are those also instances of this where they just get snatched up by, they like talk to the wrong person, they meet, or someone is like, surveilling them or like targeting them specifically, and then they just, so I guess the moral of the story here is never go off on your own with someone on a cruise ship.
Oh, I know. It's so scary that like people are actually looking for people to do this exact thing with. Like it's not like it just happened. They happened to see somebody and they happened to kidnap her and she happened to go into get sex trafficked. It was like a plan and people like scope you out and like plan to do this. And they have this whole system set up. So if you're like targeted, then it's like, yeah, it's going down that way, which is super scary. This is like a whole business. It's terrifying.
It's also crazy because like I saw other things too that said her family was saying like Amy was a very like thoughtful person in terms of she didn't really just make rash decisions. Like she didn't just kind of like, even like she didn't even know if she wanted to go on the cruise to begin with, and it took her a little while to think about it, and then she did it. So to me, the fact that she would even like agree to meet someone on a cruise ship by herself isn't like a spur of the moment decision. I mean, I guess if she like made friends with them, and I mean everyone can have their guard down, I guess, right? If you just think he's a nice person from the band. But so to me, it seems kind of weird that she would do that, but I
Yeah,
guess she
and I
doesn't.
mean,
You're not
it could have
thinking
been
that, and
she
you
could have
think,
made friends with like a female crew member, right? And then they could have just been like hit it off. This person could have been involved too, like a female befriending a female. You're like more at ease and more, a female is more likely to like trust another female kind of thing. So, I mean, that's whether there's evidence that she was hanging out with female crew members, I don't know, but that could just be another scenario. Um, this could have the crew member could have been like, I'm off duty at this time. Why don't we hang out while I'm not working, kind of thing, and then that go from there.
yeah, it's crazy that like that could just happen. Like there's no surveillance footage that ever captures anything. Like whether they didn't, I mean, they had, I don't know if they didn't have surveillance cameras, but they obviously never found anything of like, but also I guess if you're a crew member, you would know if there is cameras, maybe where places where there isn't or where it's not. Like if you're someone on the inside, it's very easy for you to shut
That's
down
true.
security of certain places.
I don't think there was like security cameras because like that never comes up in any of the things where they like the only video they had was this one guy doing that promotional video. And if you think that there
Yeah.
was other cameras, they would have mentioned it. So I don't think there really was anything.
Yeah. There's no, there's no like talk of them looking at the surveillance footage, not finding anything. It just never comes up at all. And I guess they don't have footage like earlier before I said the only reason that they knew that Brad and Amy returned to their rooms at the time they did was because of like the electronic lock system like recorded it. But it's not, there's not like surveillance footage that sees them going towards their room or anything. So yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely now there would be surveillance footage on cruises, I think. There should be.
Yeah, for sure, I think. And like we were saying before, like the laws back then, so like this cruise ship was actually like registered in Norway, so it was like a even like the laws about who has jurisdiction on these ships was like even like sketchier back then. So I think now if you're an American going on one of these ships, like you kind of are protected by American law in some ways. Back then it was just like it's like a free for all, whether you're American or doesn't matter. The American laws don't apply to you while you're on the ship. So, like we touched on at the beginning, you don't know who is involved or who has jurisdiction and who is going to protect you, and really nobody. So, that's changed a bit now, I think. But back then it was just like, yeah, Wild West out there.
That's crazy. The fact that anyone would ever go on a cruise back then, or even now, honestly, but back then, like when you think, I mean, obviously no one's thinking of it in that terms, but like if you're like a true crime person who, like, to me, that's just like so sketchy. And like you're docking in all these cities, and you're like, it's just all these, like, you're a foreigner in a new city and meeting all these new people you don't know. Like, it just makes you very wary. And all these other cases of people who went missing from cruise ships, like, there's a whole rabbit hole for this. So if you ever want to take some time and go down the rabbit hole, there's lots of, not quite like this case, but lots of disappearances from cruise ships. And one other thing I was going to say is that Amy Bradley was officially declared dead on March 24th, 2010, which would have been like 12 years to the day of her disappearance. But the case is unsolved and it does remain open, even though they declared her dead. They still have never caught anyone for it or anything like that. So yeah, and the only other thing that I didn't mention, but it's not really related to the case, I don't think, but there was thought that there could be a connection, was back when the Natalie Holloway thing was happening. They did find like a human jawbone that washed up on the shore of Aruba. And at first they thought it was Natalie's because that was the case that was all over the news at the time. But then when they determined it wasn't hers, then it was like, well, it could be from this other missing woman who went missing in the area from this cruise ship. Obviously they never like tested it or anything, so they don't know for sure, but that was the only other thing.
No, I heard they did find out that it wasn't hers either.
Oh, they did find out it wasn't. Okay.
Yeah.
So they still don't know who the fuck's jawbone is that?
Yeah.
That's creepy. It's someone's. But yeah, so she is officially declared dead by officials, but her case is still open, and it's still open on like the FBI website, like FBI.gov. It says the FBI is offering a reward of up to $25,000 for information leading to the recovery of Amy Lynn Bradley and information that leads to the identification, arrest, and conviction of the person or persons responsible for her disappearance. And on the website, it says, if you have any information concerning the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley, please contact your local FBI office or the nearest American embassy or consulate. So we'll put the links to those in the show notes as well. So ultimately just a super sad case, super scary case. And I mean, they declare someone dead, but I mean, I'm sure there's like criteria that they have to fill for that. And like, just because somebody is declared dead doesn't mean that they are, right? Like if she still was sold into the sex trade, she could still be there. It's been 27 years, coming up on 27 years, which would be a horrible thing to think someone could be for that many years. But there's no evidence either way to suggest that she is or is not dead. So they officially declared her dead.
I heard her family was like pushing. I heard her family was like pushing to declare her dead because then when they did that, they could file a lawsuit against the cruise ship company for like wrongful death or something. And so that's why they did that, even though they believed that she was still out there. So they kind of had like reasons why, like they needed like legal reasons to go after this cruise ship company. But yeah, and even if she could have been kidnapped into the sex trade, those all could have been like legitimate sightings. But that doesn't mean they could have killed her because like, oh, she was getting too much attention maybe, or she's like too old to be in the sex trade, so they just got rid of her. Like that's another possibility. So you don't even know, like still don't know if she's even alive.
That's true, because the last sighting from those pictures that came up that could have been her family says that was 2005, so that's 20 years ago now. So that's a long time between now, like there hasn't been a sighting since then, a credible sighting since then. So yeah, who knows? Like you said, and she was 23 at the time of her disappearance. It's been 27 years, so she would be turning 50 this year if she was still alive. So yeah, it's just crazy. It's scary to think. And I guess the moral of the story is if you go on a cruise, never go anywhere alone. Or don't trust the crew. I'm kidding.
Yeah, just always be aware no matter what the situation. Like just don't be on your own, I guess. Always stay with your people. Look out for each other.
Yeah, don't leave your room at 5:30 in the morning to meet someone.
Yeah, by yourself.
Mm-hmm. By yourself. Yeah. So super scary, super sketchy. Like I said, we'll put the links to like the FBI website and we'll put the links to the photos. If you're listening to the audio version and you didn't see the photos, we'll put the link for that so you can see that. But yeah, overall super scary and super sad. And yeah, we had a good discussion about it. Again, I always feel like I always say this, and I'm like, we talked longer about this case than I thought we would. But that's good because there's lots to talk about. But yeah, yeah. So thank you so
Yeah,
much
this is one of those
for.
cases you go down the rabbit hole. Like, I think if you like look on Reddit, there's like so many theories and like, just people's ideas of what could have happened. Like, this is a big one that you can really, really go down the rabbit hole on.
Yeah, yeah. There's like I went down the rabbit hole on the Reddit forums with this, and in order to like tell the story of the case and like concisely, there's a lot of stuff that I could bring up if like someone said this on Reddit or like brought up this theory and at this point, but like we'd be here for hours doing that. But I encourage you to go down the rabbit hole on Reddit because there is a lot of, and most of it's just people's like possible theories or whatever. But some people do make good points and whatever. Like I said, there's been no credible sightings since 2005, but there is a lot of stuff online about like speculation. And it is definitely a case that I really hope can be resolved, whether she's found alive or even if they just know what happened. But I don't necessarily know if that's super likely. Like unfortunately, there's so many people who are victims of this that like the chances of ever finding out the people who were responsible for that is super unlikely. So I don't know if it'll ever happen, but obviously we can hope that it does for her family's sake anyway. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. It was great to chat about this case, and we'll be back next week with a brand new case. Follow us on all the social medias. You can follow us on Facebook, Crime Family Podcast, or on YouTube, Crime Family Podcast, and you can find us on Instagram at Crime Family Podcast. And yeah, send us an email at crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com if you have a case suggestion or if you have feedback on this episode or anything. And we'd love to hear from the listeners. So thank you so much. We'll be back next week with a brand new case. And until then, take care. Bye.
Bye.